All right, we are back, and in the previous video, we set up the display of our inventory system. We also populate it with inventory slot widgets, which we've also set up so that we can click on them and notify other blueprints that they have been clicked on. In this video, we're going to continue inside the inventory menu, and we're going to create the pop-up that appears once you have clicked on one of these individual inventory slots. So a context menu will appear and give us options of either to use, drop, or return back to our inventory menu here. And then we're going to jump into the graph and start working on the scripted, the functionality for the inventory system itself. So let's continue. We are inside the Game HUD widget blueprint. Again, if you are not inside there, go ahead and go to the content browser, the UMG folder, and open up the Game HUD widget blueprint. Inside the hierarchy, let's collapse the inventory menu because we are done working with that for this particular moment. We're going to start out by grabbing a vertical box from the palette. So let's go to the palette, and under panel, let's grab a vertical box. Let's left click, drag and drop that on top of our canvas panel, and let's select it. And over in the details panel, let's rename this to action menu. Kind of make sure that this is a variable that is exposed to us on our graph. And for this, we need to make some changes to this as well. So if we go down to the behavior section, in the inventory menu, we had set the ability to set is enabled. For the action menu, we can always leave it enabled. We're just going to toggle the visibility of it. So for the visibility, let's click the drop down and set that to hidden by default. And then let's hop over to the graph and create a property value for that to be bound to. So on the My Blueprint panel, under Variables, click Add Variable. And we're going to call this one the Action Menu Visible, like so. And it should be of the eSlate visibility variable type. So if it did not automatically create that for you, just search for eSlate and then choose visibility. Go ahead and compile, and then set that default value to hidden, like so. And then compile again, and then go back to the Designer tab and bind that property for the visibility. So Action Menu Visible. Now there's some other things that we need to do as well. Let's grab our action menu here with it selected in the hierarchy. Just going to left click and drag that over to the inventory so that it's somewhere near the inventory. So mouse wheeling in to zoom in and out, right clicking to drag around. Probably should have mentioned that earlier, but I guess I can mention it now. So I'm going to drag and line this somewhat up similar to our inventory menu. Just going to stretch it out like so. Pull this down a little bit, something like that. And what I'm going to do is let's actually move it up and split the difference of our inventory menu. So what we're going to do is when we click on an item, this will appear, but we're not going to hide our inventory menu. We're just going to disable it. So that means it's still going to be displayed, but it's going to be grayed out. So it's going to be the non-active window, essentially. So I'm going to split the difference with our inventory menu and leave it like that. I think that's good. You can move it all the way up if you want, or leave it down here. It's up to you. But I'm going to do it like that. And then we also, very importantly, need to remember to anchor this action menu to the right side of the screen. So in the details panel, clicking the drop down for anchors, anchoring it to the middle right, like so. And it is now anchored. So let's continue and populate our action menu now. First thing that we're going to add is a text block from the palette. So go ahead and grab a text block, left click, and drag that and drop that on top of the action menu, like so. Going to select the text block over in the details panel, going to center it up, horizontally align it center, and then let's change the text content. Let's change this to just action menu, like so. If I zoom in, it's kind of white on white, so you're not seeing it. It'll be okay once we get in game, especially once we set this property that I forgot to set. So let's go back to our action menu here, and we need to set the Z order. So let's go to the details panel. Down under slot, there's an option for Z order. So both of our inventory and our action menu are both currently set to 0, And as you can see here by the tooltip, higher values are rendered last, so they will appear to be on top, which is what we want our action menu to do. So let's set our Z order to 1 so that it appears on top of our inventory menu. So next thing that we'll do, we need to add some buttons inside of our action menu. So let's go to the palette. Let's grab a button from common, left click, and drag and drop that on top of our action menu, like so. It's going to give us a button. Then we're going to grab some text and left click and drag that and drop that on top of our button so that we have text on top of our button. Going to select our button and hit Control C. Going to select the action menu now and hit Control V and Control V once more so that we have 3 buttons representing our use, our drop, and our cancel. And before I forget, since I mentioned that, let's actually rename these in the hierarchy for clarity. Going to select this button here. Going to hit F2 on it and call it the use button, like so. Going to select the next button, hit F2 on it, and call it the drop button, like so. Going to select this third button, F2, cancel button. So now that we have set those up, let's make sure that there's nothing else I need to do. No, there's certainly more I need to do to this. Let's select each of our buttons. Let's hold Control and select each of our buttons. Then over in the Details panel under Style, let's expand this, and let's go to Hovered. Now remember that tint that we set up a couple videos ago? Let's go ahead and assign that here. So for the Hovered tint, let's click this drop down. There is our friendly yellow. So let's go ahead and select that and hit OK. Now we are getting the same color of highlights whenever we highlight one of these individual slots. The same highlight will be applied to our buttons. So we can collapse that now and collapse this. And I think that's all we need to set up on our buttons for now. Yep, I think so. Let's update our text, actually. So let's select the first text block here. We're going to rename this in the content or in the details panel under content. We're going to say use item. And let's select the second one. And let's say this is drop item. And this final one, let's select this. The details panel, this is cancel. So with all of those set up, there's one thing that we need to do for our use item text. This isn't always going to say use item. This item in our inventory could be equipping a weapon, for example. This could be to use a health pickup. This could be to spawn something in the world. So this text is going to change. So it's going to be a prime candidate for binding. So let's create a binding for this. And let's hop over to the graph really quickly. Create a property that we can bind it to. So under variables, click the add variable button. And let's call this action text. In the variable type, let's change this to text, like so. And then let's compile, hop back to the designer, and let's assign that property that we just created. So binding it to action text. Now drop and cancel are pretty much always going to be the same. You're always going to either drop it or return to the inventory menu. So I think we're good. I think that's all we need to set up for this. Let me just double check my notes. Action menu. Yep, we set that up already. We did bind our property. I think we are good. I think we could start working on the scripted functionality for the inventory menu system itself. So let's go to the graph. I'm going to go on the graph now. And on the graph, let's see, what do we want to do with first? First thing that we're going to need to do is create a variable. Let's create a variable. So I'm going to scroll up, create a variable. And this variable is going to be called inventory. So inventory. And down in the details panel, we're going to click the variable type. We're going to search for inventory struct. So inventory structure. And we're also going to click the array icon here to make this an array of inventory structures. So go ahead and select this. And this is actually going to represent the items that are inside of our inventory. I kind of wanted to mention this really quickly. We're about 10 minutes in. If you were setting this up for like a finished project or your final result, you probably would want to store your inventory, the actual inventory that we've created here somewhere outside of your HUD, probably in the player controller, and then getting reference to it rather than doing it directly in the HUD here. This is better than doing it here is better than doing it in the actual character blueprint, because when the character blueprint dies, whatever was in that inventory is going to get erased when you spawn a new player character blueprint. However, the player controller will persist. So if you kill the player character, you're still going to have the player controller persist and then possess a new player character that is spawned. So if you are going to do this in your own project, I would suggest that you move this inventory, this actual inventory variable here, into the player controller, and then upon event construct, getting reference to it or passing it through Blueprint interface. But for our purposes, this is a tutorial on UMG and not necessarily blueprints themselves. So just wanted to throw that out there. This is perfectly fine the way that we are doing it, but wanted to mention that you would probably want to do that inside of your character blueprint just for clarity. There's always a bunch of different ways you can do things in Unreal, but just wanted to mention that. Because I know a lot of people are saying, well, why did he do it in his head? Why didn't he just do it inside the player character? Well, the player character would get killed and we'd have to respawn everything. So there's that. So with all of that out of the way, we have our inventory, and it's going to be populated with inventory structures, which are the collection of variables per pickup. Let's start working on the actual scripted functionality for our inventory system. So I'm going to delete this event tick here because we're not going to need it. I'm going to scroll over to the right here, find an empty space. And I think the best way to kind of describe what we're going to be doing here, I think instead of rather than explaining as we are going, we're going to just focus on getting everything out on the table here, and then we're going to walk through it together and kind of break down what everything is doing so that hopefully it makes a little bit more sense in the grand scheme of things than on a more granular level. So with that, let's right-click in our graph, and let's search for custom event. So we're going to add a custom event. And this custom event is going to be called refresh inventory. So refresh inventory. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to hold Alt, and we're going to drag in our activate inventory. So we're going to hold Alt and drag that in and connect it to our refresh inventory, like so, just by left-clicking and connecting those together. We're also going to set this to true here. The next thing that we're going to do, we're going to take all of our buttons, which are all these slots here. We're going to take all of these and drag them into the graph. So we're going to hold Control, just drag each one of these in like so that we have reference to all of our buttons. I'm actually just going to line them up so that they're nice and neat like this. Then going to right-click in the graph and search for Make Array. So we're going to make an array out of all these buttons. So make array is what we're looking for. Go ahead and select that. Going to need to add some pins to represent all of the buttons that we have. Again, if you have more buttons than I do, go ahead and add a pin for each of your buttons. So we have 5, so we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're going to connect each of our buttons to the array, like so. Once we do 1, the array will update to let us know that we can only connect buttons to it. Let's connect all of these up, like so. So now that we have an array of all of our buttons, let me just move it down just a little bit. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to drag off the array output here. So now we have an array of them. And we're going to say for each loop. So for each loop, not the one with break, but just the for each loop. Go ahead and select it. Then let's connect our set to the for each loop, like so. And what we want to do for each of these buttons is run a check. We're going to run a branch. So let's hold B, left click to create a branch. Let's connect our loop body to that branch. And the condition that we want to check is, let's hold Control and drag in our inventory, like so. We're going to drag off the inventory now, and we're going to search for length. This is going to give us the length of our inventory, or the number of items inside of our inventory. And once we have that, let's drag off the length. We're going to hit a less than sign if it's not hidden. Let's do a less than sign, like so. So integer less than integer. So we're going to select this, and connect it like so. I'm actually going to hold Control and grab this pin and plug it into this one like this, because we're going to take our array index from our for loop and plug that in here like so. This is going to be our condition, so we're going to plug in our condition like so. So before we continue, I'll explain what's happening here. I know I was going to create the whole thing, but maybe we'll break it up into bite-sized chunks and explain what's happening. So what we're doing is we're going to call a custom event. It's going to activate, allow us to activate our inventory so that we can display it. For each of our buttons, what we want to do is check how many things we have in our inventory. So for our for each loop, it's going to come through this for each loop, and each time it's going to get one of our buttons and the array index for the buttons, so the 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. If that value is less than the number of items that we have in our inventory, what we're going to do is execute some script off of false to set our inventory image, the image that appears on top of our individual slots. We're going to set that to null so that there's nothing inside of it and it zeroes out that button. So let's go ahead and do that. To do that, let's drag off the inventory variable here. Let's do a get is what we want. So we want to get from it. Move my length down a little bit. Move this up above it, something like that. The get that we are going to get is from our array index. So let's grab our array index and plug that into the get like so. And from our get, we can drag, let's move this over a little bit. We can drag off this now, and we can say break inventory struct. So we can break that inventory structure apart, and it's going to give us a bunch of information, which we can then use to set the inventory image that should appear on our buttons. Now, what we want to check, though, with this branch here is, say we have 2 items in our inventory. So it's going to do 0 and 1 and say, yes, 0 and 1 is less than 2. So go ahead and assign the inventory image. But when we get to 2, 3, and 4, especially like 4, for example, it's going to get to this branch and say 4, the array index of 4 is not less than the 2 items that we have in our inventory. So we are not going to do anything. We are going to set our inventory image to null. So that's what's occurring here. Okay, so let's set the inventory image that will appear on each of our buttons. We're going to do that by dragging off the array element. And we're going to set pickup image. So set our pickup image. And the value for that variable pickup image is going to be defined by the items inside of our inventory, and we're going to be able to get that by breaking the inventory structure here. So we're going to take the item image and just plug that into our pickup image, like so. Then we're going to connect the true to our set. Now I keep moving this node around. And then we're going to do the same thing for the false. So off the false, we're going to set pickup image. So drag off the array element and set pickup image, like so. However, for the false, as I mentioned, we're going to set this to null. So it will zero out the image, thus making this button disabled. So we are almost done with this script here. The last thing that we need to do for this section here, at least, is bind all of these buttons, bind our event dispatcher that we created. If you recall, inside of our inventory slot, that button was clicked. We need to bind that to each of our buttons. So let's go ahead and let's drag off of the set here, the top set here. We're going to drag off this, and we're going to do, it's called a do once node. So do once, and hit that. So we're only going to do this once. So the first time that we come in here and we get our first button and we run this check, we're going to get to this point. It's going to say, okay, we can do this one time, whatever it is following this. We're going to right click, and we're going to do a for each loop again. So go ahead and select it. Let's take our completed, plug that into the executable. For the array, we're going to take our array way back over here, our make array, and we're going to connect that to our array here, like so. So you can see the wires connecting. Suppose I could have promoted this to a variable or done reroute nodes to make it look a little bit cleaner. My apologies, but we are just about done. So let's continue. What we're going to do for each button now is drag off this array element and say assign button was clicked. And when we do so and hit enter, it's going to give us that nifty new node. This will get called whenever we click on a button now. And now whatever is connected to this, we can execute inside of this script when we've clicked on one of our buttons. So let's make sure that we connect our bindings from the loop body to the bind event here. And our refresh inventory script is complete. So let's go ahead and select all of this. And let's hit C to create a comment. And this is called refresh inventory script. So we had a couple more things that we're going to do in this video. I think we're about 25 minutes in, somewhere around there. I think I split this video up, so I forgot how much time we're in. But we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 more things to do before we can wrap this video and be done with setting up the functionality for our inventory system. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm taking my button was clicked event here, just moving it down a little bit because we're going to add some new script to it. And the first thing that we're going to do is whenever a button is clicked, we're going to take our activate inventory here, going to hold Alt, drag it in. And whenever a button is clicked, let's connect this. We are going to set activate inventory to false. So it's going to be still visible, but disabled in the background. Next thing that we're going to do, we're going to take our slot clicked here. We're going to right click on this and promote this to a variable. So this is going to be a variable. And this variable is going to be called inventory slot clicked. So inventory slot clicked, like so. And we're going to set that variable here. So it is currently set. Let's move that up a little bit. So this gives us reference to the inventory slot that was clicked. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to hold Control, grab our inventory, left click, and drag that into the graph. They're going to drag off the inventory and do a get. So we're using a getter. The index that we want to get is going to be corresponding to the slot that was clicked. So let's left click and drag and connect that like so. Once we get that item from our inventory, we're then going to break inventory structure. So break inventory structure. It's going to give us a bunch of different options here. And what we're looking for here is the action text. So we've clicked on the button. We now need to know what action text should appear on the context menu, our action menu that we created. So what should appear in the use section of our action menu? If you recall, we bound that to action text. So we can hold Alt, drag that in, like so. Connect that to the set here, like so. And then connect our action text from our pickup and assign that to what should be on our action text in our menu. And then the last thing that we need to do for this button was clicked event is take our action menu visible, hold Alt and drag that in. And we need to set that to visible so that we can see our action menu now. So let's connect that. And our button was clicked event is complete. So let's highlight all of this, hit C, and say inventory button was clicked. The next thing that we're going to do is provide the scripted functionality for the cancel button before we get to the drop and the use. So let's scroll down just below this a little bit. And in the details panel, let's select our cancel button, or not details, the My Blueprint panel. Let's select our cancel button. And down in the details panel now, we can add our on-clicked event. So we'll go ahead and click the plus sign to create an on-clicked event. It threw it way on the other side of our graph, so I'm going to mouse out and just drag it over here, like so. While we're at it, let's just add our use and drop buttons as well. So I'm going to select drop and then click the on clicked event. And let's find use, add the on clicked event for that as well. And then I'm going to move them over here as well, just for clarity. So now we have on click cancel, on click drop, and on click use. Let's start out with the cancel. And cancel is going to be pretty short. We're going to take our activate inventory here, just hold Alt, and left click and drag that into the graph. And we want to set this to true. Whenever we select cancel from our action menu, we're going to re-enable our inventory menu. So go ahead and set that to true. And then we're going to set our action menu here. I'm just going to hit Control-C and Control-V. We're going to set this to hidden. We no longer want to see our action menu. So let's go ahead and connect that to that. Last thing that we're going to do for our cancel button, we're going to right-click, create a custom event. And this custom event is going to be called Action Complete. Now this custom event is going to be handy in that whenever we do our drop functionality and our use functionality, we're still going to want to activate our inventory menu, and we're still going to want to set our action menu to hidden. So instead of adding these to both of our drop and use, we're just going to call this custom event, which will in turn call these two setters again. So with that, let's select all of this and hit C, and this is going to be called cancel button was clicked. Now for our drop button, let's go ahead and do this, and then we'll basically copy and paste our drop functionality to our use functionality because it's going to be very similar. But what we need to do is, before we do anything, is implement, if you recall back in video 2, we created a blueprint interface which had our use and drop interface messages in them. We need to implement that blueprint interface here. So to do that, let's go up to the toolbar up here under class settings. Down in the details panel, there's the interfaces section. Currently we have no interfaces. Let's add one. Click the add button. And there's our action interface. So let's go ahead and select it so that it has been added. Let's compile at the very top up here. And now if we right click in the graph, we can search for drop action. And you can see there's the add event drop action. There's also the drop action call function. There's also a drop action interface call. But if I uncheck this context sensitive, if I check that, then we get our drop action message. This is the one we want, is our drop action message. So go ahead and select that. And you're going to see that it has a little envelope icon letting us know that we are using the interface, our action interface. This is what we want. So when we click the drop button, we're going to call our drop action. There's some things that we need to tell our drop action, such as the item to drop. The item to drop is going to come from our inventory. So let's hold Control and drag in our inventory. We're going to drag off of it now. So let's drag off the inventory. And let's use a get. Let's recheck context sensitivity. So recheck that. And let's use a get function. And we need to know what index, what item in our inventory to get at what index. Fortunately for us, we provided a variable up here. So we know what slot was clicked. So we can take our inventory slot clicked, left click, and drag and drop that on top of the index here. So it's going to provide us with the correct item to retrieve from our inventory. Once we've done that, we can then drag off of the get here and break inventory structure. So we can break that out. So go ahead and select break inventory struct. We can then take our item from our inventory struct, and that is the item that we want to drop. So we're going to plug that into that. The next thing that we need to do is specify a target. We're going to use our character reference for this. So I'm going to left click and drag him in, or Control left click and drag him in, and plug that in to our target, like so. Just move those up just a little bit, just for cleanliness. And once we've decided that we're going to drop an action, we actually need to remove it from our inventory. So we're going to drag off the inventory menu, and we're going to say remove index. So remove index will actually remove it from our inventory. So go ahead and select remove index. Let's connect like so. Oops. There we go. And the index at which we want to remove is going to be coming from our inventory slot that was clicked. So I'm going to connect that to that. And once we have removed the item from our inventory, we need to call our handy function that we created earlier called refresh inventory. So update our inventory now that an item has been removed. And then once we've refreshed our inventory, we're going to call our other handy node that we created called action complete. And that's going to hide our action menu and re-show our inventory menu. So with all of that, I'm just going to move it up just a little bit and hit C to create a comment. And this is drop button was clicked. So the last thing that we will do before we wrap this video up is do the use functionality. So let's go ahead and do that. First of all, let's do a selection box and select all of this except for our on-clicked event there. And hit Control-C, then Control-V to paste it. Because we're going to use a lot of this functionality. We aren't going to use the drop action, so I'm going to kill that drop action. And we're also not going to need reference to the player character, so we can kill that as well. But everything else is going to remain the same. All we need to do now is right-click in the graph and search for use action. Again, we need to uncheck for this, so uncheck context sensitive. And make sure that we grab the use action message. So go ahead and select the message. There's our envelope, again, to let us know we are using our interface. Let's connect our on-click use button to our use action, and then the executable out to our remove index, like so. Why is it not letting me connect? There we go. Everything else is going to remain the same. We still need to get the inventory item, the slot that was clicked. We do need to specify the item that is to be used. That's going to be the target. So let's take our item, plug that into the target. And then we're going to remove the item from the inventory. We're going to refresh our inventory. Then we're going to call action complete. So with all of this, let's select all of this and hit C. And this is going to say use button was clicked. So let's wrap here. This is a little bit longer of a video than I had hoped for, but we got a lot done. We created all the script for our inventory. We can refresh our inventory. We can drop items from our inventory, use them, click items in our inventory. We actually also displayed the action menu that appears when we use, drop, or cancel. That's going to do it for this video. In the next video, we will start working on the pickups so that we can pick up an item and start testing our inventory. Unfortunately, we're currently not at a state where we can test this because we don't have any things that can be added to our inventory. But we'll do that in the next video. We'll create the pickups that we need, and we will see you in the next video. Thank you guys for watching.